to reach out to Scott or Pastor Alison with any questions you may have. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Pastor Alison. Let's hear it for her. Woohoo!
Thank you, Anton. Good morning, everyone. As Anton mentioned, my name is Alison. I'm the lead pastor here at the River. It's so good to be here with all of you. Those of you who are physically here in the room today, welcome. And also a very warm welcome to those of you who are tuning in via our live stream. So some of you know that I was recently on vacation with my husband, Mike, and some members of Mike's extended family. Mike is not in the audience today. He's back with the kids. But we spent a few days in Walt Disney World, which was a lot of fun. My niece and nephew in particular had a really good time. And we also spent some days relaxing at the pool and beach. Overall, this was like an awesome trip. We made a ton of great memories. But during one of our days at Disney World, there's this period of time when Mike and I were on our own. We were separated from the rest of the group for a bit, and we were waiting in line for something, as one does in theme parks. And while we were waiting, I couldn't help but overhear the conversation that was happening behind us. So the woman behind us, she began speaking about New York City and what a truly awful, horrendous place it is. According to this woman, our mayor is terrible, our airports are terrible, our streets are terrible, our subway is terrible, the people are terrible, everything about our city is terrible and to be avoided at all costs. What about Broadway? Her friend said. Who cares? She responded. You can just go see a touring production somewhere less terrible. And it went on and on and on like this. And as this was happening, I noticed this energy building up inside of me. So as the energy continued to build, I started to, try to get curious about it. And I realized that it felt like there was physically something inside of me that wanted to get out. It felt like words that wanted to make their way up through my chest and out of my mouth. And I realized that part of me wanted to say something to this woman. Part of me wanted to confront her. I realized that I was really angry about what this woman was saying about my city and my neighbors. And even more than that, I was angry that she was airing her opinion so publicly with no consideration for who may be standing around her. As the anger inside me continued to build, I realized I had some questions to consider. Should I confront the woman? Or should I keep the words to myself and just vent to Mike later? If I chose to say something to the woman, what might be the repercussions of that decision? But on the other hand, what might be the repercussions if I chose not to say anything? If I were to say something, what exactly should I say, and how should I go about saying it? What kind of response would I actually be hoping for or not hoping for? And what was behind this impulse to speak and confront? What was I hoping to achieve? And also, how much was the heat and the humidity and the blazing sun impacting my judgment at that moment? If you're curious about what happened next, I'd be happy to tell you more after the service today. But for now, I'm going to leave it open-ended and on a cliffhanger. Because the truth is that there isn't one right way to handle a situation like this. And there aren't necessarily right answers to the questions that I was considering. All of us experience moments in our lives when we must decide whether or not to say something or to keep our thoughts to ourselves, to speak up or to remain silent. We face these situations in our closest relationships, with strangers we encounter on the street and in theme parks, and with everyone else in between. We face them in our families, our friendships, our communities, our workplaces, on social media, and in the public sphere. We face them around issues small and relatively unimportant, like my experience on this trip, as well as around things that are seriously meaningful in our lives and in the world. And the tricky thing is that what is right or wise or loving in any given moment is always contextual. There are so many factors to consider as we evaluate how to go about using our voices for good. We have to consider things like safety, capacity, familiarity, and trust, or the lack thereof. We have to think about things like cultural norms, historical patterns, our own identities, and the identities of the people that we're engaging with. We have to think about our hopes and our desires, both in the short term and the long term, to try to weigh cost versus benefit, harm versus hurt, and so on. And it really helps in these cases to also think about, what are our own tendencies? What are we bringing to the situation? For better or for worse, what are some of the ways that we tend to find ourselves approaching things like community, communication, and conflict? There's a lot to think about. When I think about what it looks like to use our voices for good, for the sake of unconditional love, I'm reminded of a story in the Bible that comes from the book of Numbers. Numbers is the fourth book in the Bible, and in it we see more of the story of the Israelites after their exodus from slavery in Egypt. And in this book, we see the leaders of the Israelites conduct two major censuses where they count all of the people in the community. And one of the purposes of these censuses was to determine how the land should be divided up among the people. So essentially, tribes with more people would get more land, and tribes with less people would get less land based on how many people they had. So during the second census, after everyone had been counted, 5 women approached the leaders. And I apologize, I'm probably going to pronounce a lot of these names wrong, but I'm going to do my best. So the passage says this. Then the daughters of Zelophehad came forward. Zelophehad was son of Hefer, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, of the clans of Manasseh, son of Joseph. The names of his daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, and all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting, saying, "Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the congregation of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the congregation of Korah. But he died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers." Moses brought their case before the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "The daughters of Zelophehad are right in what they are saying. You shall indeed let them possess an inheritance among their father's brothers and pass the inheritance of their father on to them. You shall also speak to the Israelites, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall pass his inheritance on to his daughter. If he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the nearest kinsman of his clan, and he shall possess it. It shall be for the Israelites a statute and ordinance as the Lord commanded Moses." So after the census was completed, these 5 women, the daughters of Zelophehad, realized that because their father had died without any sons, their family line would not receive any land. The issue was twofold. Their father's name would be erased as if it had not existed, and they would also be wholly dependent on the generosity of other male relatives to make space for them to live on their land. The daughters of Zelophehad felt that this outcome was unjust. And so they went to the leaders and all who were assembled to advocate for themselves and to argue their case. They argued that their father had died of his own sins, but he had done nothing worthy of total erasure. He had not been part of the group that had rebelled against Moses and God. And beyond that, they argued that as their father's descendants, they should be allowed to inherit land even though they were women. They argued that they should not be forgotten in the distribution of land. Instead of jumping straight to a ruling, Moses did something interesting. He took the matter to God. The passage says Moses brought their case before the Lord. And then God instructed Moses what to do. God told Moses that the women were right in what they were saying, that they should be able to inherit land. God went on to clarify the laws of inheritance and instructed Moses to share these clarifications with all of the Israelites. So this change was not just to apply to these specific women, but to all women among the Israelites. So here we have what I think is a wonderful story about a group of women fighting to ensure their own survival and using their voices to advocate for themselves in the face of an unjust policy. And then amazingly, they actually get what they asked for. God backed them up, Moses listened, and a new, more just policy was put into place. So not only did they get a positive outcome, but all the women in their community would benefit as a result of their bravery. And I read this story and I think, gosh, if only it always worked out like this. Like, I just love how it plays out here. But you'll probably won't be surprised to hear that the story doesn't end there. A number of chapters later, members of these women's tribe come before Moses and the other leaders, and they go on to express their concerns about the new inheritance policy. It seems that from their perspective, women being able to inherit property threw a wrench in things, in how they understood how things were supposed to be. The passage says this: the heads of the ancestral houses of the clans of the descendants of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, of the Josephite clans, came forward and spoke in the presence of Moses and the leaders, the heads of the ancestral houses of the Israelites. They said, "The Lord commanded my Lord to give the land for inheritance by lot to the Israelites, and my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give inheritance to our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. But if they are married into another Israelite tribe, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our ancestors and added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So it will be taken away from the allotted portion of our inheritance." So it seems that what they were concerned about here was the potential for their tribe to lose some of its land. According to the passage, when the woman in this context got married, they would typically become members of their husband's tribe. So if a woman married outside the tribe, she would take her assets, her inherited property, with her into the marriage and into the husband's tribe. And this was a problem for the male leaders. From our distance, thousands of years later, in a different context, it's hard to know how genuine this concern was. Were the men truly concerned about their tribe standing as a whole? It's definitely possible. I also wonder, though, if they were just trying to find a way to stop women from owning property. It's hard to know. But given that in our own country, until 1974, it was legal to deny women credit based on their sex or marital status, it's not hard to imagine there being some resistance to the idea of women owning property in the mix of things. Here's how Moses responded to the male leaders. Then Moses commanded the Israelites according to the word of the Lord, saying, "The descendants of the tribe of Joseph are right in what they are saying. This is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry who they think best, only it must be into a clan of their father's tribe that they are married, so that no inheritance of the Israelites shall be transferred from one tribe to another. For all Israelites shall retain the inheritance of their ancestral tribes." So it seems here that Moses found a compromise solution with this ruling. The daughters of Zelophehad and the other women, they could still inherit property, but if they married, they would have to do so within their tribe, thus ensuring that the land stayed within the tribe. What's interesting is the passage doesn't really tell us how anyone felt about this ruling. It doesn't tell us how the male leaders felt or the women themselves. We don't know if anyone was truly satisfied. But the passage does tell us that the daughters of Zelophehad did as the Lord had commanded Moses. They were married into the clans of the descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's clan. So it seems like they were able to move forward with this compromise arrangement. So how are we to make meaning from this story today? What does it mean for us? Well, I'm not going to give you a simple answer to that. I am going to tell you one thing that I think that we shouldn't do as we're trying to make meaning. One thing that I think that we should not do is try to approach this story like a formula. Too often, I find this is our impulse when it comes to stories in the Bible. We identify one or more characters as the protagonists that we are meant to emulate. And to a degree, this can be helpful. Sometimes in the Bible, we do find models that are worthy of emulation. But where we run into trouble is when we expect certain outcomes. When we expect that if we act in the same way as someone in the Bible, that we will always experience the same results that they did. How I've seen that done with this particular story is an encouragement to be like the daughters of Zelophehad, to advocate for oneself and for others in the face of unjust policies in order to bring about positive change in the world. And let me be clear, we should absolutely do that. Let's do it. This is a wonderful way to embody unconditional love in the world. But I'd recommend let's do it with the knowledge that sometimes our advocacy will be well received, like it was in this story, and other times we will be met with resistance even greater than what we see in this story. We may encounter leaders who respond like Moses did to the daughters of Zelophehad, or we may encounter leaders that respond quite differently. Biblical stories can be rich sources of inspiration, but they aren't meant to be treated as formulas for our lives. Over the years, I have found that some of the approaches that we use in our River Kids and River Youth programs are really helpful when it comes to my own engagement with faith and with the Bible. So some of you know this, but I first started out as the River as a member, and then Caroline, one of our founding pastors and the creator of our River Kids program, she recruited me as a volunteer, and then I came on staff assisting her, and then, things progressed from there. But from early days in the church, I've had a really strong love and passion for our kids programs. I think They're really wonderful. And if any of you are interested in getting involved with them, please let me know, because I think it would be really enriching experience for you, as it also is for our kids and youth. But to tell you a little bit about how we think about things in River Kids. In River Kids, we see stories as a special meeting place for kids to enter in and interact with God. And we share Bible stories every week with the kids as a way to help them explore their own thoughts and feelings about themselves, about God, and about the world around them. Rather than telling the kids this is what a particular story means, we invite them to consider its meaning for themselves. And one of the ways that we do this is by asking them open-ended, wondering questions. Questions like, I wonder, what is your favorite part of the story? I wonder, what part of the story feels like it's about you? I wonder how you experience God in this story. I wonder what you wonder about. And so this leads me to my first practical suggestion for us adults, which is, whenever you can, lean into wonder. Intentionally cultivating wonder about ourselves, about others, about God, and about the world has the potential to bear so much good fruit in our lives. Wonder can open us up to new, surprising, life-giving possibilities. And it's a really helpful tool if we want to experience the Bible and its stories as a place where we can meet and interact with the Spirit of God. Personally, I found that wonder is a bit like Pringles. You know that slogan, once you pop, the fun don't stop. Sometimes, at first, I find that it can be hard to open myself up to wonder, but oftentimes, once I do, I find that wonder leads to more wonder, which leads to more wonder, and so on. So I want to share with you a bit of what I've been wondering about this story that I shared with you today. I wonder what it was like to be one of the daughters of Zelophehad, to have lived through the death of their father, to have no brothers, to not be able to inherit property. I wonder how the daughters decided to come forward and argue their case to the leaders. I wonder if all 5 of the daughters agreed that it was a good idea to come forward. I wonder if the daughters had any support from other members of the community. I wonder if these daughters, these women, were the first to challenge this unjust law. I wonder how the daughters felt as they were planning, as they were speaking up, as they were waiting for a decision, once they heard the decision, and also as they learned about the concerns of the tribal leaders. I've been wondering where I see myself in this story. I wonder when I have been the daughters, when I've been Moses, when I've been the tribal leaders, when I have been a member of the crowd. I wonder if there is anything in these characters that I hope to emulate or hope not to emulate. And finally, I wonder, what do I like about and what do I not like about this story's depiction of God? I wonder how this portrayal of God is similar or different from the God I see in other parts of the Bible, and different or similar to the God I experience in prayer. And finally, I wonder how God might be speaking to me through this story. When wondering, I'd encourage you to try not to censor yourself. Give yourself permission to question, to doubt, to wrestle. All of these things are important aspects of the journey of faith. And give yourself time and space to really sit with the questions and see what surfaces. Asking questions, posing them like I just did to all of you, is a wonderful first step, but it's really remaining with them, sitting with them, processing them that allows for deeper insights and invitations to emerge. And as I have sat with my own wondering questions, I found myself drawn to different parts of and different characters in the story. And this leads me to my second practical suggestion, which is to challenge yourself to relate to various aspects of or voices in a story. At first, most of my contemplation centered around the daughters of Zelophehad, around topics like advocacy, using one's voice for good, speaking truth to power, fighting unjust laws, and so on. But over time, I've found myself thinking more and more about the other characters as well, about their voices and perspectives. I found myself considering Moses and contemplating topics like effective leadership, open-heartedness, seeking wisdom from God, and acknowledging mistakes. I've also found myself considering the tribal leaders and considering topics like resistance to change, scarcity mindsets, allyship, and blind spots. The more time I've allowed myself to wonder, to imagine, to talk to God in prayer about the story, and the more I've been intentional about relating to different aspects of the story, the more I've been inspired and challenged to think and act in new ways. One key insight that has emerged for me through this process is the importance of attentive, open-hearted listening. Using our voices for good matters, and so does listening well to our own inner voices, to the voice of God, to the voices of others, especially to the voices of those who are crying out in pain. The daughters of Zelophehad were, of course, remarkable in their advocacy. At the same time, it was also important that Moses was open to hearing the women and open to making changes as a result of what he heard. Not everyone responds like that. And so I find myself wondering what helped Moses to develop that posture. I also find myself remembering and being glad that God is a good listener. Psalm 116 begins by saying, "I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my supplications. Because he inclined his ear to me, therefore I will call on him as long as I live." For this psalmist, what really made the difference, what really felt powerful to them was feeling heard by God. Feeling heard, feeling seen, as Peter spoke about in his sermon last week, feeling known and feeling felt are all powerful ways that we can experience love. And they're also ways that we can be intentional about extending love to others. In the spirit of being a good listener, my final practical suggestion is to come to church this summer. And the reason I say that is because next Sunday, we're going to kick off our first Pass the Mic cohort. It's very exciting stuff. So over the past few months, a group of Riverites have been preparing sermons to share with all of you. Maddie and I have been coaching them through this process, and they have been doing such an amazing job. I cannot wait for you to hear what they've been working on. These are voices that you will not want to miss, voices that come out of our community. So I'd really encourage you to plan on attending church for as many Sundays as you can this summer so that you can hear from these folks who have such wonderful things to share with all of us. You'll also be excited to know that on August 16th, we'll have the opportunity to hear from founding pastor Charles Park. Charles, yes, round of it's very exciting. Charles is in town, and he is excited to come speak, so be sure to mark the date on your calendar and plan to be there. So lots of exciting voices to hear from this summer, so I really hope you'll be able to join us for as much of it as possible. All right. At this point, I'd like to invite the worship team back up to the stage, and I will close us in prayer. This prayer comes from Cole Arthur Riley's book, Black Liturgies. God of every beautiful thing, make us people of wonder. Show us how to hold on to nuance and vision when our souls become addicted to pain, to the unlovely. It is far easier to see the gloom and decay. So often it sings a louder song. Attune our hearts to the good still stirring in our midst, not that we would give ourselves to toxic positivity or neglect the pain of the world, but that we would be people capable of existing in the tension. Grant us habits of sacred pause. Let us marvel not just at the grand or majestic, but beauty's name etched into every ordinary moment. Let the mundane swell with a mystery that makes us breathe deeper still. And by this, may we be sustained and kept from despair. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.